In this section, we're going to take a look at using the basics of Adobe Illustrator. It's not going to be a full course, but it will be enough to get you up and running and designing your own logos. If you do want more in-depth information on using Illustrator, there are courses on Udemy, and you can also find free videos at tv.adobe.com/product/illustrator. So one of the first things we're going to take a look at is these two tools here at the top, and I refer to them as a filled in arrow and an open arrow, but they're actually called selection tool and a direct selection tool. So let's start off by just drawing a square on the page, a black square. And as you can see, if I select this selection tool, I can literally just move that about. But there's not a lot else I can do. Even if I could try and click the sides, just get the same thing. I can scale it, but not a lot else. So now let's try this direct selection tool. Now what I can do here is I can grab parts of it and move it around. Just undo that. I can grab a single point at the edge. But if I grab it at the centre, it works just like the other tool. Now let's try adding another square. Just make that another colour just so we can see the difference between the two. Now I'm going to group them together. So if I just select both by holding the shift and go Object, Group. Now you can see if I go on the selection tool again, both those objects move around together. So if I now go on Direct Selection tool, you can see I can just pick up one of the objects. And let's go back to the selection tool, but you can see they're still grouped. And you can do exactly the same thing before, so you can also grab points like that, just single point. I could grab more than one point, but if we go back to the selection tool, they're still grouped. So the next thing we're going to do is have a look at the pen tool, and we can use it literally just by clicking on the page to create straight lines. Another thing we can do if we either want vertical or horizontal lines is just hold down the shift key. Now holding down the shift key would also give us the option of making 45-degree angles. Okay. We can also make curves with the pen tool. So this time you click down, then click, but instead of letting go, hold on and drag a curve. Do the same thing again. Click, hold, and drag a curve. Click, drag, click, drag. And we'll go back to the end point. Now, say I wish I had an extra point in here. It wasn't quite the shape I was looking for. I could just go into the pen tool here and go Add Anchor Point. I'll do it again. Put another one there. Oh, perhaps that's not quite where I want it, so I might remove that one. So I just go to Delete Anchor Point and then click just there. And if I go back to the Direct Selection tool, I can also alter these curves. So just select the point that you want to adjust, then grab one of these pivot points. As you can see, you can just change where that curve falls. Now if you wanted to, you could also go to this Convert Anchor Point tool. Now this lets you grab one of these anchor points without the other side, so I can literally do that. You can see the other one staying still. Or you could also decide that you don't want that to be a curve anymore. Click on it and it becomes a straight line. Now let's have a look at the text tool. So if I just click on the little T icon there, I can literally start typing. And then literally if I put the cursor down there, hold down and drag, I've now selected that. You can see at the top here I've got a font menu. So I can just choose any font that I've got on my system there. And you can also pull in a character menu. So instead of grabbing your font from up there, we can go to Window, Type, Character. And we can do just the same thing with this. So here you've got options for your type size and your kerning and your spacing as I showed you before. can also make type run around a path. So we just draw a path first. Let's get rid of the fill. Okay, and if we go then down to type on a path tool, so just click with that onto the path, and as you can see that's now following that path. So if I select that by just holding down and dragging, there we go, type on a path, we've got some options here. So at the moment that's called rainbow text. If we go skew, which basically means it all slants, so it's sort of on a vertical, go 3D ribbon, not quite sure where you'd use that, but type stair step, which basically puts everything almost like it was on a little step of its own. I'm not quite sure what you'd use the last one for either. The line tool works pretty much as you'd expect. Select it here and literally you can just drag lines wherever you want. And again, if you hold down the shift key, you can either do vertical or horizontal lines or 45-degree angles. Now let's get rid of those. And we've got shapes tools here. So this is a square. Obviously if you hold down the shift it's a square. If you don't hold down the shift it could be a rectangle of any dimension. But underneath the square there are other options. So you've got a rounded rectangle tool. And say you didn't want the corners to be quite that round. If you hold down your Option or Alt key and click on the artboard, you can then change that. So I'll make that a 5. And obviously you can see the difference there. It's not as rounded as this option. So let's delete these for a minute and take a look at some of the other options. So I've got an ellipse tool. So if you hold down the shift you get a circle. If I hold down either the Option or an Alt and the shift, you get a circle, but it starts from the center point, and that's really useful. Let's delete that. If you don't hold down the shift key, you can create ellipses of all different sizes and proportions. We've also got a polygon tool. So if you hold down the Option or Alt key and press on the artboard, you can see you can choose how many sides you want the polygon to have. So if I go 8, I get a octagon. If I go down on 3, I'm going to get a triangle. And we've also got a star tool, and again if you hold down either the Option or the Alt key, you get to choose the 2 radiuses. So if you think about a star and the outside points of your star, they're on the outer radius, and where the inner points hit, that's like the inner radius. So let's try. So we'll do an outer radius of 20 millimeters, inner radius of 10, and we'll make it a 5-point star, but obviously you can do as many points as you want. Okay, so let's just try another one of those. So let's try putting in 20 points this time, and we'll make the radiuses a lot more sort of similar. So let's go for 16. Again, you can see the difference there. So now let's take a look at the brush tool. And if you just hold down and drag, you can create a brush stroke. There are loads of different options for these. So if we go to Window, Brushes, where's Brushes? There's the brushes. But obviously we haven't got many options in there. But if we go on this side bit here, we go Open Brush Library, and you can see you've got loads to choose from. So I'm going to go for artistic ones. Let's go for charcoal pencil. So I could pick one of these here. So I'm on the brush again, pick that charcoal, and you can see the sort of effects you can get. And you can alter most of these. So you see as you use them, they come into this palette here. So now I could actually go in and edit this. So I could change the width. You can see it changing below there. And if you were using a pen, a Wacom tablet or something like that, you could also change so it varied depending on the amount of pressure you were putting on the tool. The pencil tool is fairly similar to the brush tool. You can just literally draw on the page, and you can also use the settings, same brush settings that you use, so you can pick any of these again. Let's go back to something fairly basic. There's also quite a neat little tool called a smooth tool in here. So say that's not a particularly smooth curve, I could run this tool over there and try and create a better curve. You basically have to just fiddle around with it until you're happy with it. You can see it sort of smoothing out my curve there. Let's try it on this bit as well. So you just gradually get a better curve. And there's also a path eraser tool, which literally just deletes your path. Now let's have a look at some of the tools that let you rotate and scale objects. So we'll start just by drawing a square, and then here's the rotate tool. I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but just grab one of the corners and you can rotate that into any position that you want. Okay, we'll get it back to normal. And then here we've got a scale tool. So you can just drag a corner. If you hold down the shift key, it keeps it in proportion, so it makes it stay as a square. So if I let go of the shift key, you can see I can scale it, but I can scale it in any which way. Now the free transform tool does pretty much the same thing. I can scale it like this, holding the shift key. I can scale it without, but it also lets me rotate as well just by grabbing the sides. So that just makes things a little bit quicker really. Now underneath the rotate and the scale tool, we've got a few more tools hidden, so let's take a look. So here we've got the reflect tool, and what this does is create a mirror image of the shape. So I'm going to choose a point I want it to be reflected on, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, press down. You can see I get the option then to choose whether it's reflected vertically or horizontally or an angle of my choice. So I'm going to go to vertical and go copy. Now this is going to obviously create a copied version, a mirrored image, but if you didn't press that copy, basically it would just move the one that's already there. Okay. And then underneath the scale tool, we've got the shear tool. I think it would be easier if I create a plain square again that's not tilted. So if we grab the shear tool, you can just double click, which you can do with most of these tools, and you get a panel where you choose what degrees you want to put in there, or you can do it manually. So I can just click down the bottom here and then drag this in any angle. I'll just show you again on the numerical panel. So say I pick 45 degrees, it would sort of shear, it would tilt 45 degrees. Now we're going to take a look at the dropper tool. As you can see, I've already created a red square. So what I'm going to do now is draw a circle, and it's a black circle. But imagine if I wanted that circle to be red, and I really wanted it to be the same red as this square. Just take the dropper tool, press on the square, and it copies the colour over. Now you can also copy over type styles. So if I write hello just here, let me just blow it up a bit so you can see it a bit better. And we're going to put that in times. Copy that. Let's write goodbye here. I'm going to make that a different font, so I'm going to make that Helvetica. But say then I've changed my mind and really I'd like it to be the exactly same size. So hang on, to make it easier, let me blow that up a bit in size. So really I would like this to be in this style, so it'd be in times and this size. So I'm going to take the dropper tool, just click on there, and as you can see it's literally copied both the style and the size. Another thing we need to take a look at is this fill and stroke palette. So let's draw a circle to start. I'm going to fill that with, let me fill that with magenta. Okay, at the moment though you can see here it's got a black stroke. I don't really want it to have a black stroke, so I can just delete there. But then say I change my mind and I would rather it had a magenta stroke but no fill. I can just switch that there. Then I decided I wanted that to be yellow. I just select the fill, go down to the colours, I drag that to make it yellow. As you can see it's very easy, just switch between the two and to delete strokes where you don't want them, or delete fills where you don't want them. Now let's take a look at the Pathfinder palette. Now this is really useful for creating logo designs. If we go to Window, Pathfinder, and a little palette comes up here. As you can see I've got two shapes ready. So what I'm going to do is put one next to the other. And imagine if we wanted all these three bits to be separate. We could do that using the divide. So click on that, and then we need to ungroup them. So we go to Object, Ungroup. And as you can see, we've now got three separate elements that we could use. So let's undo that and try something else. Okay, so let's put that over top of here again. Imagine I wanted that square removing, so I wanted to minus the front from the back. So let's go minus front. As you can see, the square has now been extracted from the circle. See what else we can do. Let's put the two together again, and I can merge them. So now that's one object. And we can also do a crop. You can see you've got the bit that intersected between the two of them. Play around with a few of the other selections and see the sort of effects you can get. Another really useful tool is the Align tool. So we find that by going to Window, Align. So what I'm going to do is select these three shapes. And then imagine I want to align them on a baseline. I just click the one here. You can see they now fall to a line just at the bottom. I can do the same at the top and the same with lining up the middles. And we can also do the same vertically. So align left, align right, and align them on a centre line. It also lets you distribute objects. I'm going to show you that by doing some same size squares. I think it will illustrate it a bit better. So I'm going to put these all at different distances. First of all, I'm going to align them on a centre line. But then, imagine I want these equally spaced out. So I'm going to select all four and then hit the distribute objects. You can see they're now equally spaced. We do the same horizontally. So first of all, I'm going to align them. It doesn't really matter how, so I'm going to align them centered. And then I'm going to do a distribute horizontally. And you can see they're equally spaced again. Now let's take a look at the layers palette. You can access that if you haven't got it open already by going to Window and Layers. And as you can see, I've got three rectangles, each of which are in a separate layer. So the red's on the bottom, yellow in the middle, and blue on the top. This means if I grab the blue, you can see it falls over the top of the other two. But I can easily change that order. So if I wanted the blue to be at the bottom, I'd just drag it and move that to the bottom. What I can also do is lock certain layers. So if I wanted that yellow box, that layer with the yellow rectangle in, not to be able to move, I can just put the lock on it just like that. So now if I try and select that, I can't. I can select the blue, I can select the red, but I can't select the yellow. I can also hide layers, just to make things easier if you're working on quite a complicated job, by turning on and off. So I'm turning the red rectangle layer off like that. If you want to create a new layer, just get this little triangle here, go to New Layer. So we're going to call this green. And I'm going to create another rectangle there and just colour it up green. And you can delete layers in much the same way. Another thing that's important is to regularly save your work. So if you haven't saved already, go to File, Save As, leave it on the Adobe Illustrator AI setting, call it whatever you like, hit Save. If you're sending the job out to somebody who hasn't got such a high version of Illustrator as you can obviously choose one of these, but for now leave it on the CS5. You could also save if you wanted as an EPS, so go File, Save As. Instead of the AI, choose the EPS version. And I leave it a transparent background. So now you should have a basic understanding of Illustrator, and we'll be covering more bits as we go along and work up the logo designs.